So it's been almost 2 weeks with the Osmo Action. Is it hype or is it worth it? Stick around and find out.
What's up? Welcome back, everybody. My name is Original Dobo, and here on this channel, I do drone and tech related content. So if that's at all interesting, definitely go ahead, smash that subscribe button before you leave this video. So today we're going to be talking about the Osmo Action after the hype. Is it worth it, or should you just wait on it altogether? Well, I've got some thoughts and opinions on it, but I wanted to sort of lay out some prerequisites for this video review. I'm doing this entirely like sort of the average Joe shooter, and I'm not really lining up any cinematic shots because, let's face it, these cameras are really meant to be just grabbed and used sort of haphazardly and to be put in places where you couldn't normally put your DSLR camera. So with that being said, all of the settings for this video were left to auto, and it was all filmed at 4K 30 frames per second with Rocksteady on. Normal color profile, no desync alike, no color grading, just sort of so you can set the expectations. With that being said, let's talk about the overall build quality because there's a lot to like about this build quality. Now I'm going to make some comparisons to the GoPro Hero 7 Black, but I'm not going to totally make this video about Hero 7 Black versus the Osmo Action. But the build quality I definitely do like. I feel like it's right on par with the Hero 7 Black in its own separate way. It feels really great. You have two buttons up at the top, the record button along with the display power button. You do have a quick settings button over on the left hand side. I also like the way the ND filters come on and off of this, that they just screw. It makes a lot of sense. On the bottom side, I do like the way the battery door goes in on the Osmo. I feel like that just makes sense to be straight in instead of a slide over and up of the GoPro. Now, there are a lot of things to like about this design of the battery door. Well, the battery door has a replaceable seal on the Osmo, as to where if you want to replace the seal on your GoPro, you have to replace the entire door. So that's something that considers that wear and tear that little gasket's going to take every time you open it. Now, both of these cameras do charge via micro USB-C, which is good to see. I really do wish more companies would be able to accommodate USB-C. The Osmo Action can take up to a 256 gig SD card, and it shoots in H.264, which is fantastic. I don't really find myself ever using H.265, so not really a big deal there. It does have a 12 megapixel camera. Overall usability, I find this camera to be pretty easy. So take a look at this video test I did while I was just jumping in the truck.
I think one of the biggest things that I found wrong with my content is the fact that I'm so worried about making like this picture perfect image, and you don't really need that. You don't need picture perfect. You just need something that's going to get you great quality, a great image, sort of right now. And honestly, I feel like the Osmo Action for me is the least, and I'm gonna steal a line from the Everyday Dad, but it's the least fiddly of action cameras.
Now, what do I mean by fiddliness? And I hate to keep using that word because it's not my phrase that I'm coining here, but overall, when I pick up the Osmo Action, I just feel like it's super easy to be able to navigate through the menu system. Everything would be exactly where you would expect it to be on a camera. And I'm not knocking GoPro's camera system or their menu system for that matter. It's just, I prefer the way the Osmo's laid out. Also, it just feels like the menu is a bit more smooth in scrolling. A couple of times when I was scrolling through my GoPro and just trying to get it configured, the menu system would lag and freeze up, and then I would eventually have to reboot the camera to get it to restart. Now, I'm not saying that the Osmo Action is without fault, because believe me, there are a couple of things that could be done better here, but software, as far as menu systems goes, I think they really nailed it. Now, I went ahead and compared the Osmo Action to the GoPro Hero 7 Black, but before I get into the test footage, let's pay some bills. Are you trying to order an Osmo Action? Do you want to save 5% on that Osmo Action? Then you need to be ordering from DroneWorks.com. That's right, DroneWorks is your one-stop shop for everything drone and Osmo Action related. And if you want to save 5%, enter code OriginalDobo Osmo Action at checkout. Ah, you look pretty cool with that Osmo action, ready to take on the world. And look at that cool swag you're wearing.
You can do it. 1, 2, 3.
Shallow. So this is a test between the GoPro Hero 7 and the Osmo Action. Just sort of doing some gentle vlogging with it out here in the water. Getting it really wet. It is Memorial Day weekend. So I hope you guys enjoy this ridiculous footage. It is absolutely crazy out here. What? Sure.
Is it waterproof?
Yeah, it's waterproof.
Oh.
You hold the camera.
Okay. How? I see you.
What are you doing?
I don't know. Say hi, Kaylee. Dada.
I'll hold it down. You got it yet?
Really, I have to get in.
Now, in looking at that test footage, it's clear to see that the Osmo definitely does something weird with the water. Actually, I think it may just be DJI camera color science in general, because if you notice, the Mavic also turned the water to be like some sort of pea soup color, a little weird, not really attractive, as to where the GoPro had this nice, really subtle tan feel to it, and it just looked really inviting. Although I did prefer the skin tones of the Osmo Action more. I'm not really a big fan of that whole saturated look, although I understand some people do like that right out of the camera. I'm always screwing with things in post, so it's not really a big deal for me. But skin tones did look good. I noticed that the GoPro seemed just a little bit sharper, but that's not honestly a bad thing to have unsharpened video. I've noticed that overly sharp makes it look too fake, and that's just not really my cup of tea. Now, stabilization wise, I feel that Osmo just gets it done. You could see from that footage where I was riding on the boat that I mean, we were hitting wakes pretty hard, doing about 35 miles an hour. And this thing was just a boss. So stabilization wise, Rocksteady definitely gets it done, and I enjoy it more than that of the Hero 7 stabilization. I took a couple of quick photographs too with this while I was out there, and I feel like the photos looked pretty solid. Honestly, you know, for an action camera, if you had to snap off some quick photos, this can get it done. And this is probably one of the reasons why I would use this front facing screen, is solely because of photos. I wouldn't really use it for video, but to line up, make sure everybody's in the shop, that front facing screen definitely does help. Now, something that I found that this camera has that the GoPro doesn't, and that's auto exposure brackets, where I can take up to 5 photos in different exposures and then blend them down together to make sort of an HDR image. Now, if this was your only camera and you were shooting real estate, you can totally get away with some very acceptable MLS photos with this. And once you apply some lens corrections, it looks pretty darn good. I did some test samples here before correction and after correction, and I think they look pretty passable if you ask me. But how's this do in low light? Well, I didn't want to compare the GoPro to this in low light because let's face it, like I said, action cameras suck in low light, but I wanted to compare the king of low light action cameras, and that's the Osmo Pocket. So I went ahead and just aimlessly wandered around Tampa collecting this footage. We'll be back in just a second. right now this is a test. We're walking up a staircase in a parking garage in Tampa. The audio is probably pretty bad, but I've got the Osmo Pocket, Osmo Action. Hopefully this is worth it when we get to the top. This is a tall parking garage. Oh my God, this is only level 8. We're definitely, I need to work out. Let me know what you guys think about this. I am not gonna see this footage until I get home. I'm not gonna like preview it or anything, but we have the Osmo Pocket, Osmo Action, vlog test. I'm out of breath. I just climbed 10 flights of stairs. Don't ask me why I didn't use the elevator. Probably should have, but not gonna lie, it's very peaceful up here. This is so serene, but it's also lonely. It sucks. Any friends in the Tampa area, if you feel like, I don't know, climbing rooftops in the middle of the night, flying or capturing epic footage, please inquire down below. I realized that sounded like a really bad Tinder ad, but strike that from the video. So after looking at that test footage, it's honestly clear to see that the Osmo Pocket was the clear winner, and it just goes to show you that in low light scenarios, you know, EIS is just not going to be as good as mechanical stabilization. The Osmo was just so much better in the low light, but the Osmo Action didn't put up, you know, too big of a loss. I think it did, you know, okay. Honestly, I felt like the Osmo Pocket is so underrated, and I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to wait a little bit before I reviewed the Osmo Action, because I wanted to give DJI a chance to go ahead and do firmware updates and not jump to a conclusion on this camera, because I did that a little bit too quickly with the Osmo Pocket, and then firmware update after firmware update has really improved that camera, and it's probably one of my favorite little cameras to use to date. And the same can be said about this. I know in some future firmware updates, it's going to hopefully fix some things, but low light is not one of those things I think it'll really be able to fix. You'll probably have to turn off Rocksteady and throw it into 24 frames per second if you want to get the best possible low light performance out of this. And that can be said the same for the GoPro. But all in all, I do like this camera. However, you know, if you already own a Hero 7 Black, I just can't see spending the money to jump towards the Osmo Action. However, if you are on the fence of a action camera and you're considering getting an action camera, honestly, this is worth taking a look at. Now, it's not perfect. There are some things that they do need to fix, like there's some screen lag that some people have pointed out, and that could be a potential problem depending on how you're filming. And there's also the issue of the condensation that builds up in the front of the screen. Now, I can totally say that, you know, in all my testing that I didn't have any issues with condensation, and that's me taking it basically right out of my house, cold house, 75 degrees, going out into about 105 degree weather. Really didn't have any issues with condensation. Even as you can see in most of my videos, submerging it down in water, didn't have any issues with any condensation. So, I mean, your results may vary, and if you do see a lot of condensation, you may want to reach out to DJI support to see what they can do for you. But honestly, that's sort of not really normal. I don't care what anybody says, but I didn't have that problem, and I do enjoy this camera. So yeah, it's definitely a win for me, and I'll probably stop using my GoPro because it's just, this is so much easier, and I don't have to worry about digging through menu systems or it crashing. And I know it's going to get much better because it seems like every time they put out a product, it doesn't take very long before it becomes awesome. But let me know what you guys think after looking over all this footage in sort of an average Joe perspective. Love to know your thoughts. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Stay original.